Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for taking your time to meet with us today. I'm Jennifer Hill. I'm the board chair of ThoughtRiver, and I am delighted to be here with you. ThoughtRiver, as many of you know, is the industry's leading contract acceleration platform, helps you get to signature faster, enhances team productivity, and unlocks key data. And I am very happy to be here with two friends and legal experts in the field, Joe Green and Tiffini Smith. Joe is the Chief Innovation Officer at Gunderson Dettmer, and Tiffini is the Cyber Protection Global Lead at Accenture. So welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. As our legal landscape, as everyone knows on this call, is evolving so quickly. There are so many changes, not only in terms of technology, the way we practice, the way that we deal with clients. So today's webinar is going to cover a number of topics to help make sure that you're not only current, but that you're actually staying ahead of the curve. We're going to cover everything from AI to risk management to cybersecurity, of course, and to compliance and all sorts of things that will help keep you at the top of your game. We're going to kick off with brief introductions, and then we're going to dive right into the discussion. Please add your questions or comments in the chat. The great team at ThoughtRiver will be monitoring that, and will let us know because we want to make sure that we get all of your questions answered. So with that, I will turn it over to Tiffini. Tiffini, please introduce yourself.
Thank you for that, Jennifer. So I'm Tiffini Smith. As Jen just mentioned, I am the global legal lead for our cyber protection business at Accenture. And you can think of it this way. It's the division within the Accenture business where we sell cybersecurity services to other organizations. We will also utilize some of our own services as well, but it's all things cybersecurity, from your identity access management, incident response in the event of a breach, to as well as things like space security, which will be another area you'll see in marketing more recently from Accenture. Been with Accenture for 9 years, been practicing law for longer than I'd like to say, but I will tell it to you, lovely people, for 19 years now. So happy to be here. Pleased to have the opportunity to dialogue on this topic.
Thank you. Joe.
Hi, everybody. It's really great to be here with you today. I'm Joe Green, Chief Innovation Officer at Gunderson Dettmer. I started my legal career at Simpson Thacher as a corporate attorney before moving into an office with Jennifer, actually, at Gunderson Dettmer. In its New York office, was one of the very early attorneys in that office, working with startups and VC firms, helping them invest and go throughout the life cycle. I then took a bit of a detour. I spent 4.5 years at Thomson Reuters, so working at a huge legal technology company. I was working with their practical law business as a senior editor, focusing on creating content for practicing startup lawyers. But I also got involved quite heavily in the legal tech space at Thomson Reuters. Since I had a startup background, it sort of made sense. And that's what ultimately led me back to Gunderson. And the title of this panel today, Future-Proofing Legal Counsel, that's usually how I describe what I do as Chief Innovation Officer, is trying to future-proof the firm.
Outstanding. Thank you for that. Well, let's jump right in. It's interesting to be at this perspective, having been at a firm, having worked in health tech, having interacted with both of you in so many different situations in the past and seen the legal profession advance. So let's first start with the topic on everyone's mind, which is AI. It's changing everything from the way that we intake documents, both on the corporate and litigation side, how we review research, how we review contracts, how we engage with clients. So I'd love to hear from you both what you're seeing and what you feel like we really need to know about, like what's changing. Joe, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So we've been quite out front, I think, as far as law firms go, in the AI space. Like many firms for years, we've been using products to help AI products to help with things like due diligence, document review, things of that nature. But with the more powerful large language models coming on the scene, a full year before ChatGPT was released, we were using a tool powered by large language models to help with data point extraction from legal agreements. So maybe something that folks who are in-house have also been using with your CLM tools. We used this tool, saw the power of what large language models could do, started getting some experience being prompt engineers before we really knew that's exactly what we were doing. And then when ChatGPT, earlier this year really, kind of exploded, we decided that, for a whole host of reasons, that it made sense for us to build a tool using these foundational large language models. So we launched a tool called ChatGD for internal use to basically help our lawyers do what all of us are trying to do, I think, in this space, which is jump up the learning curve, see how these tools can be used, what are good use cases today, how can they be leveraged. So we built this tool leveraging the Azure OpenAI based models to basically provide a secure ChatGPT-like experience for our attorneys that they could actually use in their real work, as well as retrieval augmented generation, where the end users can upload a document or a collection of documents and then effectively chat with the documents or manipulate the language in the documents using the large language model. So we launched that in August. It's still very much in the early days in terms of learning about, the best use cases. But, we've already, found a whole bunch of our lawyers and our business professionals getting some really great value out of the tool.
And so since you're talking to GCs and CLOs every day, I mean, what are the things that you're hearing in terms of how they are adopting AI? There's, what I certainly hear when I speak to other colleagues is that there's, some are super excited and ready to just dive right into legal ops, and everybody dives in a different place. And then others that are a little hesitant, either for the change within a larger legal team or a change of just the perception within the business users. So what are some of the things you're seeing? And maybe can you give some examples, de-identified, of course, of folks that you feel like are really doing it well and have a solid thesis for jumping in?
Yeah, I think it really varies depending on, the type of the organization, the risk profile of the organization. Companies are coming at this just like law firms at, very different, levels of willingness to jump in and start using it in, kind of production use cases or with, internal, sensitive data. And, the tooling, around this is all still relatively immature and changing very quickly. This technology is, just you go to sleep one night and you wake up and the next thing you know, it's embedded in some tools that you've been using for a long time. So, my sense is that everybody's still, kind of trying to figure it out. I think the potential for in-house lawyers in particular, the use cases that we've been finding most valuable right now are not kind of headless, end-to-end automated, now we used to do it this way, now we use this large language model powered tool and it just takes care of it. It's all things where you still need the human being in the loop, and it's a start. It's an accelerant. And for in-house lawyers in particular, who are just under tremendous time pressure, don't have enough resources, may not have a legal operations team to kind of build, streamlined and productized ways of working, this is a potential, huge accelerant to being able to, do the things that you need to do to get the job done, but, a little bit faster, a little bit easier, with a little less cognitive load. Manipulating language is really what these tools are fantastic at. And, in-house lawyers are having to do that all the time in creative ways. So.
Thank you. I'd imagine you see so much, particularly because Accenture is an expert in change management and it has so many tools and frameworks for helping teams manage this particular kind of change, both in technology and people. Tell us a little bit more about what you're seeing in terms of implementing tools and things that have gone well.
Yes, that's and it's a great even insight hearing some of Joe's experience as well. So excellent question. I would say what I see predominantly in my role and within Accenture is our development of tools to help us implement solutions for clients. So it's kind of, if you think of it like client focus, how can we deliver a service that maybe historically we've delivered, but in a more efficient, more effective way? So I would think for colleagues who are on this call, who are maybe in-house counsel for companies that are making product or trying to expedite their services, it's just what Joe hit on. A lot of my guidance, even in thought leadership around utilization and development of those tools, is the insertion of a human. Is a human involved? It's almost like there's still this, I'll call it, need to have that, or I'd say it this way, not necessarily always a need, but a limitation and certain amount of risk if a human is involved, because you can then make certain decisions around that solutioning that otherwise, if you've seen, I'm sure those listening have even seen news reports where someone leverages Gen AI to the extent that they don't have a human involved and it's not exactly accurate. So it mitigates a bit of that risk. But then it also I think having a human involved still helps us be cognizant of things like data sources we may be using, privacy principles, the output itself. Is it a reliable output? And making those determinations, or at least mitigating a bit of that risk. So definitely seeing it across the board, lots of different solutions, but yet it's still at that nascent or more frequently utilized with a human at some point in the process before full output and implementation inside of a client or even our own environment.
You both brought up two really important points that I want to touch on. The first is the concept of a human in the loop. And I think that is such an important point, because a lot of the things that we read, or perhaps that we see in other industries or disciplines, is that some small bits of AI for certain tasks can act like a magic wand, but it doesn't mean that it can for everything. And of course, some of the fear people have is both the accuracy, or what if something is missed. And that's why it's critical for the human to still be in the loop, particularly a thoughtful, experienced practice human, such as the folks on this call, that can then look at the data and kind of take it that last few really important miles. The second thing that you both touched on is that you've both engaged with in-house engineering teams. And I feel like that's a place where traditionally lawyers were separated. And now with all these different tools, not only for attorneys, but also just within the products that they're building, it's more critical than ever for attorneys to be involved and have some interface with the engineering teams. So I'd love to hear more about ways in which, you as attorneys have seen, the in-house role really develop a strong relationship with the product and engineering teams. Tiffini, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, happy to. It's a great question. I'm pretty close with the engineering teams. I'd say what I see, and to your point, Jen, is this added proximity, meaning an added layer deeper into the development process. So a bit more in the use case, whether if it's Gen AI, what's the use case? How would we use it across all tool sets? So it may be, because there are multiple Gen AI tools out there, there are multiple ways to interface with those tools. So what I see is a deeper understanding of how we connect with tools, how we utilize tools, what are our licensing arrangements in a solutioning kind of perspective, almost quasi-product counsel. So I think that, that relationship with where counsel, especially if the legal team is serving more generalists, I think there'll be a larger product counsel component to help guide those teams either in the development of a solution or integration of a solution or offering, so then they can make a kind of informed decision, because not all tools are created equal, and not all, I think, methodology or solutioning equates to the same legal risk. And so what I find is that relationship gets a bit deeper and closer in the development stages, at least for myself. And I think it's a great position in that I can influence and shape and suggest different possible solutions or stages in the launch of a product, which I think also helps us kind of mitigate a certain amount of risk as we go on that journey to a final solution, or on the journey, I'll call it, of Gen AI kind of becoming even more robust. And I even oftentimes think of the litigation in the land space. Like, we don't yet know, we haven't seen enough litigation, I don't think, to make certain, assessments on risk. So how conservative we want to be. But I've definitely seen a closer relationship.
That makes sense. Joe, you lead a pretty large engineering team within Gunderson. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. And, we're building legal technology. So, having the lawyers involved isn't so much from a risk angle as a product angle. We find, so the broader team that I lead, includes pure play attorneys who work in kind of an innovation capacity. So they're doing knowledge management, but also kind of, helping to steer product decisions that we make about things that we're rolling out internally, whether we build them or implementing third-party tech. We also have pure play technologists on our team. And then we have some unicorn-like, former practicing lawyers who also happen to be, very skilled engineers. In a prior life, who are able to bring both of those skill sets. But I think we always find that, pairing subject matter expertise with technical talent is where the magic really happens. I think that's, true in most product use cases. So, we have our technical folks working extremely closely with the people who have the subject matter expertise in terms of the things that we're building. And, I think that, there are a lot of within companies, I think there are, in-house lawyers who are going to be advising on, product that's incorporating AI from that kind of risk, perspective, but also, presumably companies are going to be building, tooling and generative AI to help make the business run better. And that includes the legal function. So kind of a legal ops, perspective. I think the lawyers being very tightly integrated into that is going to yield the best results. I was speaking at a conference with a bunch of tech GCs maybe last month, and somebody mentioned that they really don't like referring to their business counterparts as their internal clients, because they feel like that creates separation that shouldn't be there. That really they're part of the same team and working closely together. And I really like that ethos. Something that I think, frankly, outside counsel should probably work towards adopting as well.
I think that's a great point. And the point about everybody being on the same team really is, particularly because law and like the legal team and the product and engineering team have traditionally been separate. And so it sounds like that there's just a necessity both from product and data and internal tools for those things to be integrated. Any advice for first-time GCs or CLOs who perhaps haven't integrated with engineering in that way before and really need to build that relationship?
Tiffini, you're in the trenches there.
I know. I was just thinking that it's a great question. I was going, if you haven't built those relationships, it almost makes me think probably a cadence, a check-in. That'd probably be the first step I would do. Just check in, especially if it's a company where they're going to create product that would be either market-facing or product tools that they would utilize to deliver services to their clients. Check in with your engineering team, perhaps the engineering lead monthly, just to find out what their development efforts look like and what their roadmap looks like. I suggest that in the event where I historically, both in all of my various organizations I've worked in, the engineering teams can move very quickly. So depending on, on their awareness of legal risk or, their desire to have something out in the market or used, I think the mindset of what I find engineering teams is very, how do I get this to perform this function very quickly? And less about where that came from. So they may be pulling open source software, utilizing Gen AI tools, right? And all of those underlying contracts will be of a lesser importance from their point of view about the delivery of a new, functionality very quickly. So I'd say, the lead of that team, probably a monthly cadence until there's a synergy built where they can then identify when to reach out. Because what I think that also they can become huge advocates of legal. Like once they're kind of legal aware, or that they'll know like, hey, I'm in a space that I think I should reach out to my legal team. And so then, some of that cadence may shift, or at least they'll be able to kind of be another touch point for at least raising awareness around what they're doing and developing, and when they think they may have a risk or an IP risk. I'm just throwing that out as a potential, right? Like a development risk or, a use case risk of Gen AI tools, just as an example.
Yep.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Go ahead, Joe.
I was just gonna say, I totally agree with that. I think that if you're in an organization that's the engineering team and the legal team are still fairly siloed, building trust is really key. And I think having those regular interactions is useful, not just when, there's a problem that it's been identified that you then need to deal with. And, having, trying to create, again, that level of trust that, the legal team isn't, just a bunch of Dr. No's, that, you're there to help the business make risk-adjusted business decisions, and help achieve what the engineering team is trying to achieve, in whatever, kind of creative ways you need to. I think that's the way to build the kind of trust that creates the kind of relationship where it eventually reduces risk, because then, they understand that if they come to you, it's not just going to be, an impediment.
That's right. I mean, legal plays such an important function that is often undervalued, because you're right. We are often looked at that, we are Dr. No, as opposed to we're actually here to help you minimize risk. and help you move your business forward faster. And we can do that in a bunch of different ways. It's not just looking at contracts or setting up foundation or avoiding problems. It's helping you build product faster. It's helping you close deals faster. It's helping you think through strategy and if there's any regulatory hurdles on how to get through all of those faster. So I think the more that in-house counsel can look and view themselves and help position themselves as we are really a strategic advisor, we are here to help accelerate your business, and we can do this in a bunch of different ways, then perhaps that will make some of the silos break down a little bit faster. Let's move on to risk a little bit. You know, the landscape of from a regulatory and geopolitical perspective are obviously changing super quickly. And that filters into everything related to data, from not only how we intake it, how we protect it, but what we do with it. Any advice about managing those changes quickly, helping everyone understand them and make sure that their products are keeping pace?
It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work.
A lot of work. And for a small legal department, I think, partnering very closely with your outside law firms. And, I think a strategy, because of how complex the world is getting and how specialized lawyers are needing to be to really be cutting edge in those disciplines. I think having a strategy of having a suite of firms that where you're getting kind of, best in class, advice, the people who are closest to what's happening that can really help you see around corners is increasingly important. And so, being in a position to develop those relationships and then lean on them, I think is really the only way through it.
And I would echo and piggyback and then add an additional point too. I think there's probably, like, if I were at a place of, well, what, at the onset, and let's say I'm going, holy smokes, this landscape is changing. I think the first step is knowing what you have. What data do you have from your customers? What are you using? Is it personal data? I think there are oftentimes situations where a company may not know what they ingest, even their own data, how long it stays in your organization. Do you use that information in some way? Is there data analytics? What's your long-term plan for the data? Just kind of those, I'll call them big block questions, and kind of having some visibility to that, or at least awareness of what your data landscape looks like in your organization, can then help with, as those regulatory changes are coming forth, and trying to be in compliance. Or even I've seen customer requests. If you are servicing a customer or delivering a product to a customer may ask you a question or about their data, or even the vendor tools that maybe you utilize. What are their data? Ingestion, analytics, use, how long do they keep it? And what types of data are they keeping from your organization? And then as a result, if you're utilizing that for your customers in your overarching either solution or product, what does that mean for your solution and product as well? It's just like I had a similar reaction to Joe in that it's such a complex and a great question, Jen, because it's such a complex landscape and set of issues, and it's going to hit across, multiple, when I think of legal, regulatory problems or potential problems, as well as just operationally how an organization kind of functions and how much they have to dedicate to the operations. But I'd say if I were giving advice, my first step would be just kind of generally know, what are you using? What data are you collecting? How long are you collecting it? What are you collecting for your own organization, and how you keep it?
Tiffini makes a really good, the degree to which your house is in order and you know what's going on, increasingly, the expectation that you have to know that kind of stuff in order to comply with this ever increasing, regulatory thicket. If you can't get your business in order and get visibility into what's happening in your business, and exactly the data, particularly around privacy regulations, is it's impossible to even assess your risk. The risk that you're kind of unknowingly taking.
Yeah, I mean, even when you join, it kind of, you can't take for granted what people have told you the data is. You really almost have to go back to first principles and sit side by side with the engineering team and really understand it, understand where it comes from, how it comes in, what you're doing with it, what people want to do with it. That was always my favorite question to ask the engineering team. If there were no regulations, what would you want to do with the data? And then you pair back from there, because it gives you a sense of where people might color outside the lines, or, where perhaps you can push things or get additional permissions from your clients for your vendors. And then, of course, the policies that you have. Do you have the right policies that are written? Are you going to pass compliance with a particular vendor or a client? And, we've all filled out those vendor security questionnaires that take forever, and you have to, upload 27 different policies and then make sure people are actually following them. So it really is a lot. What are some things so aside from like understanding your data, are there other best practices that in-house counsel can follow, even in terms of thinking about data? Like if you're there day one, what would you like? What is your advice to someone coming in de novo?
I think what you were just suggesting, Jen, is key, right? Like, when you're coming in, don't assume. And listen, people are coming into organizations of all different sizes and at different stages. A lot of the GCs that we're working with are, the first GC, the first lawyer at these companies, and are walking into God knows what what kinds of horror shows that are kind of happening on the ground. But regardless of where you're coming in, again, really getting your hands dirty and asking those kinds of questions, going to the source. There's really no substitute for that, I think. Even in larger, more complex organizations, taking the time to do that and really, trying to understand where the data is, where it's flowing, what policies you have, but also what has been done with those. What are people's level of understanding of those things through, somewhat casual kind of introductory conversations. I think you can really start assessing where those pitfalls may be, and come up with an action plan to try to, remedy some of those things.
Yeah, I would echo that. And then I would think I would probably start to try to map it in a sense, like this is where my first brain goes, just start to understand probably if I had a product versus a service, and then based on that understanding how it's used, just big block, not even getting, because it's just to your point, Jen and Joe, it could be overwhelming if I'm a new GC coming into an organization. But if you can kind of understand what your products or your teams are doing with data, and just start kind of mentally categorizing or actually categorizing. So then I would drill deeper in the areas where there's more risk. And you will be astonished sometimes how engineering perception of what is, like, if from a data privacy point, what is personal data? That there may be some groundwork to do just with your engineering teams to understand what constitutes personal data. What is PII? Why is this data more sensitive? What does that actually mean? Because from their perspective, they're thinking, performance objective, delivery objective, and less about that type of data and information. And they will categorize things as non-problematic data because of their removal or their lack of proximity to the legal kind of nuance, and even, how their tool sets are working, what vendor tools are they using? Like those would probably be my first questions. But if I were to step it up a level, before I would dig that deep across my whole organization, I'd probably just try and figure out what products, do we sell these products? Are we doing services? Do we leverage data in that service? If the answer is no, that becomes back burner. Or if the answer is yes, but not personal data, maybe I would prioritize products that I know have an ingestion of personal data and that analysis, and then move on to the contract language, the legal nuts and bolts around other data to make sure we're in compliance with our contracts. But then in addition, I'd say my last maybe layer would be to look at the long-term planning. What's our storage? How long are we storing? What obligations do we have to notification obligations? I'd start to look at that in the event of a breach, or even in the event of updating our own contracts to make sure our customers, clients, whomever we're servicing are aware of what we're actually doing.
And that is a perfect segue into the next topic, which is what happens if the data gets breached. That's always a worry, not just how are we using it and what can we do with it, but then what happens if, God forbid, we have a breach. Let's talk about cyber threats for a minute and some of the things that you're seeing. And Tiffini, let's start with you because that's what you work with day in and day out. What are some of the things we unfortunately need to be freaked out about?
Great question. I would say if I were to step at like and some of this is what I hear, as well as what I've seen, as well as what I've become aware of just through the community of cybersecurity attorneys. So ransomware, I think that would be probably the scariest form of threat for companies, because it usually, obviously with ransomware, they're going to take your data. They're going to basically hold it hostage for ransom. And what that looks like in practice is that you won't be able to access your data without without them giving you the encryption key or the access key, so they hold your data hostage. What I would say from a threat actor perspective, a trend is that they're younger. So historically, I would say, this is by historically, I'm going pre-COVID. So you would find, which is
a long time ago in the data cyber world, right?
You're like, I'm like 18 months, 2 years, a complete lifetime ago.
Vintage, yes.
Right? You would see ransomware usually in these more, I'll call it senior outfits. It's truly about ransom, and it's truly about a payday, and then they're on to the next potential victim, really. What you see now is that's younger, and what that looks like in practice is it's both the ransom, but it's also the kind of clout opportunity, and then it's a bit more, I'd say, hectic in that, like, you may get a repeat ransom from the exact same threat actor. So it leads into like these best practices if you're actually in an incident or responding to an incident with ransom, and your data is being held hostage. But to me, the first step is to understand where's your vulnerability. Try to secure the vulnerability, because it would be absolute, not only tragedy, but just kind of a failure of sorts to then be that vulnerable again, especially to the same threat actor. And that would be a new trend that, the cybersecurity realm is hearing of, these actors coming back and holding you hostage again. It's more, you could think of it like, not only is it about the money, but it's about the power, the opportunity, the brand recognition for themselves, the clout associated with ransom and money. So I would just caution that. I hope that gives a bit of a flavor of kind of the scariest, I'd say.
I think it does. And then on top of that, if you get breached by the same actor again and you haven't changed your processes, then you have an additional regulatory hurdle and responsibility.
Exactly.
And that adds just a ton of pressure to legal teams.
Exactly.
Gunderson works with thousands of GCs. What are you seeing? What's new and scary?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's concerned about cybersecurity, the prevalence, and to Tiffini's point, the kind of increasing messiness of the process, with actors who are, maybe not, quite as predictable. I think, creates a lot of headaches for people. I think the biggest challenge with it is, again, that, other than following best practices, what else can you really do, right? I mean, it's at some point this may, this may hit anyone. And I think the key is, again, following the best practices, and making sure that you have plans in place about how to respond, making sure you're aware of all of your regulatory requirements, breach notifications, and all of that sort of stuff, so that when it does happen, which will be, feel very catastrophic and incredibly pressure filled, that you're not trying to figure it out on the fly, that you have a game plan. So making sure that you have those game plans in place, I think is really key, because at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do.
That's true. And even testing the game plans, dry runs. There's a number of third-party companies out there that can simulate breaches and do white hat hacks, so that teams, and not just the legal team, but actually the full business and engineering team, get in the practice of the fire drill, because it is going to be scary and stressful. And you've got multiple people to answer to, depending on the size of your company, your industry, the data set that you're holding. So definitely some practice would help. Tiffini, you're based in the EU. What do you see in terms of differences of either best practices or trends in cybersecurity between the US and the EU and UK?
Great question. I would say overarching, it's the regulatory landscape. So very different approaches. So the EU, there's an EU Cybersecurity Act. I'd say a lot of focus, even from a regulatory perspective, on product cybersecurity, OT, ICS. So thinking about operational technology. I think if I were to generalize, the way the approach is in Europe is, Europe being just different, distinct countries. There's kind of this EU-wide approach in saying we need to have our operational technology secure and notification across nation states within the EU, so that they can identify those kind of indicators of compromise and, threat intelligence sharing. So ways of securing that, ways of enabling that. But I would distinguish, there's a layer in of a product obligation under the EU Cybersecurity Act to have a certain, I'd say, minimal measure of cybersecurity built in. So kind of like cybersecurity by design on the product level. If I were to contrast that to the US, same outcome in a way, different approach to that outcome. And the way I would describe it, so in the United States, we have, and I say we because I'm American, albeit living in Europe and practicing in Europe as well. So there's that American part of me, but there is Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act where the federal government can have private organizations share information of what they see with indicators of compromise and potential threat actors, and that there's this obligation of confidentiality. So it's kind of enabling a similar structure, whereas in Europe that happens through the EU regulation, and then the nation states adopt that regulation. In the US, the federal government says, if you share, we can then disseminate kind of threat intelligence across and help private organizations keep themselves secure, or at least be aware of threats and keep secure. And what I also denote through the product, I think the kind of approach to commerce in the US with product security comes in part through the litigation landscape. So as companies either buy product or rely on product, have an expectation of security or contracted security, that litigation then causes more rigor in the product designers and developers as they sell product. So again, I go kind of, it probably equalizes in a result, but in different approaches to get to that result.
That makes sense. Joe, I mean, since you work with so many general counsel, are there best practices that have filtered up, or are there ways in which you advise in-house counsel from really taking advantage of the vast knowledge base that their outside counsel has?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of going back to something, that I said previously. The regulatory, I mean, just from this conversation that we've had, I mean, my head is sort of swimming. I'm sort of out of this game and mostly focusing on building technology these days. But it's just so complex that I think you as an in-house lawyer and general counsel, I think you just really need to make sure that you have the right partners in place to help you navigate it, particularly as it changes so rapidly. It's frankly just seems too much to try to take on yourself, and really lean on your outside lawyers to help you, not just when questions come up or advice, but really what proactive measures can you be taking to try to get out in front of this as much as possible.
Yep, there is so much to be mindful of. It really is head spinning, and it's as though we have to be experts in every possible dimension. So when we don't have the benefit of a big team, definitely lean on outside counsel and help them give you the cheat sheets so that you can make sure to get these processes in place. Let's switch gears a bit into things that you feel like make your practices better. Are there tools that you're using internally to communicate with teams or help disseminate information that you really feel are improving practice and that can give in-house counsel an edge?
Yeah, I mean, I think sorry, Tiffini, you want to go ahead?
No, I was going to say one thing that just came to mind, but it probably isn't a tool, but it would be something I think would help to give a bit of peace of mind. When you said peace of mind, it's resonated, Jen, but it would be cybersecurity insurance as well. So for companies, as they're starting to try to get their footing, look at an insurance policy, get some insurance. Now, it will require certain checks that you can do, like a pen test annually, or, things that you could purchase pretty, I would say, with a moderate, lower price point, and then it can deliver that, kind of ensure that they're in compliance with their insurance policy obligations. But that would be one. And then I'll pause. I know, Joe, you had thoughts too, but I'll think of other tools internally that could make it easier too.
Yeah, we've been working on a whole bunch of different modern ways of delivering the services that we deliver, and to enable our companies, some of whom don't have in-house lawyers, but also many of whom do, to comply. So a couple of examples. We've built tooling that basically allows our companies, when it comes to their offer letters, PIAs, NDAs, things of that nature, many of which are very state specific. And as following the pandemic, even smaller companies will have employees that are remote and distributed all over the place and subject to countless different regulatory regimes. We've built tooling that effectively allows us to have a base set of forms that are compliant in all of the jurisdictions that our clients need it to in the US, 50 states, for example, that we can update as the laws change, which they do quite rapidly, and in some cases quite substantively, while the client can go ahead and generate those kind of form documents instead of having a Word form that we provided some years ago and having to figure out how to maintain that and keep that up to date. They can just generate the forms and it'll always be on the latest and greatest, set of those forms. So just another way of, delivering the services that help everybody stay compliant, and keep pace with very quick changing laws. We've also been, for a little while now, using, intake tools, the ability to, create faster value, get the answers, more quickly by, for routine types of requests, allowing clients to give us exactly the information that we know we're going to need right out of the gate, instead of, kind of doing this all over email and asynchronously with some lag in between. So we're really focused on, how can we use technology to help intermediate the outside counsel, GC, or, in-house relationship, to just, make things move faster, help you stay on top of this kind of ever growing complexity that we're seeing.
Yep. Can I verbal high five Joe really quickly on that one, Jen? That's a total verbal high five. Just as you said that, I was thinking even some self-enablement. So to the degree, like some of these questions like that Joe was describing, you start to intake from your engineering team or your business executives. Maybe there's a way to almost profile, right? Like based on these answers, I think you are okay to sell, or I think, and just as a small legal team, ways to reduce the volumes or to enable like a focused tailor on the ones that are truly higher risk. Again, I'll go, these are all shades of yellow. So like, even though it may be lower risk, there may be still risk there, but it's just low enough that we think it's a, acceptable risk to live with. So that's just to go. It's a total verbal high five. I think those questionnaires, if that can be created and then somehow either automated or at least a quick look, if there's a paralegal or CM or someone junior in the legal department that could do it once over and then assess, hey, this fits in this profile. Those are easy ways to kind of tailor the focus of the legal team.
And this is what legal operations is all about, right? It's about productizing legal, right? Productizing legal advice, and streamlining it and making it as, easy to consume for the people who ultimately need it. And that should be a value chain, right? Like that should go from the people on the front lines, the salespeople negotiating contracts that are, trying to get the sale done, the engineers who are, doing what they're doing, through the in-house lawyer's office, out to the outside counsel and back, as seamlessly as possible. That's future perfect.
I totally agree. And I think it's such a good segue into like the overarching challenge that GCs have, which is there's so much different technology. There's so many places you can start. Before all of this, and even the last 10 years, the approach to practice, whether litigation or on the corporate side, has been largely kind of the same. You intake, you deal with the client, you help resolve the matter, and that's it. And now there's so many things you can automate, and everyone's asking where to start. But to your point, you gave some great suggestions on where you can start. And just in general, it kind of depends on what fires are burning and what's going to help accelerate your business most. Is it your legal team? Is it getting contracts signed faster? Is it something related to engineering? Is it regulatory? Now that lawyers are strategic advisors more than they are just practitioners, it's really important for them to tell the business, hey, this is how we're going to accelerate your business forward, and I'm going to help drive exactly where we have to start. We're nearly at the top of the hour, and I want to leave time for questions. So if there are any questions, please feel free to let us know. Otherwise, I've got a couple more before we sign off. All right. Well, last call for those who are on the Zoom. If you've got other questions, now your time. You raise your hand or put it in the chat. All right. Well, then I am going to follow us up with, please tell me 2 things that keep you up at night, and, one rule that you think all GCs and in-house teams should live by.
But I had one, as almost as you spoke it, the fear, kind of rolled over me, and it came immediately to my mind, which is product being sold with absolutely no legal review at all. That's my worst nightmare, is that there is some product developed, out on the market. That would probably be number one. Number two would probably be marketing statements, because of the associated liability that could occur. So and potentially geopolitical, depending on where it's sold. Bear in mind the area of service I support. So that those two would literally keep me up at night. Like, is there something being developed with no legal kind of insertion in that process? So that just goes to say, for GCs out there with product, that that's probably what would keep them angst as well.
Makes sense.
Yeah. From my perspective, which is again kind of the the outside counsel perspective, and particularly someone who works on building the future of what a cutting edge law firm should look like. One of the things that keeps me up at night is that I think we have a lot of clients, both our kind of earlier stage companies who are founder led that don't have in-house lawyers, and our companies that are later stage with GCs that are hesitant to reach out to their outside counsel because they're worried about speed, cost, etc. And that basically the service that we're offering is not allowing us to meet the needs of our clients, and is leading to suboptimal outcomes for them. That's one thing, but that really is the big thing that I'm very focused, and I think our firm is focused on. How do we provide services at a price point, at a speed, and at a scale that really allows us to meet our clients' needs and deliver real value, which is our number one goal.
Let's close out the webinar with one piece of advice that every in-house counsel needs to know. Tiffini.
Every in-house counsel needs to know, and I would say, I always think of it this way, even with those people I work with or in my team. Do your best. You're looking for the big things, mitigate the big things, and then the rest, just take it at, it's methodical. Just go step by step, process by process. Otherwise, it's just too overwhelming. So your best is good enough. Do your best and work your process, and you will get there.
Excellent. Thank you. Joe?
That's a great one. And as the outside lawyer here, you're not alone. You don't have to do everything yourself. And don't try because it's not going to work. So make sure that you have a team outside that can help you shine. That's always our goal with our GCs, all of our in-house lawyers. We want to make you look good.
Fantastic. An excellent note to end on. Thank you so much for engaging in this conversation and sharing so much wisdom and advice today. I hope for the folks who've joined us, it's been super helpful. We look forward to having more of these conversations about how to future-proof GCs and just generally act as a knowledge resource to help push the legal practice forward. Thank you so much for joining us today. Very much appreciate it. Thank you to the team from ThoughtRiver for hosting. Take care. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks.